welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
And this is the podcast where every week we review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
And that classic pro wrestling event here on season 2 of the podcast can be weekly television from any pro wrestling company around the world that we were able to find weekly TV for and dump into the randomizer.
That's right. These are not our favorite episodes. These are not things we always wish we'd seen and never did. This is we fire up the randomizer, which is full of weekly television from all over the place.
Thousands and thousands of episodes that are available to be chosen completely at random. Like you said, it's not our favorite episodes. It's not necessarily our least favorite episodes. It could be something that we would never have any inclination of watching if it was not for the existence of this podcast and the randomizer.
No, so we're going to parachute in to weekly television from all over the country, from all over the territories, from all over the world at different time periods. And it's our job to kind of bring you in to the little bit of the history and where we are in the wrestling landscape. And then we will just deep dive into that show and see how well of a job they do of filling us in on what's going on, because we're just dropping in at random.
Exactly. And with these weekly television shows, it's a little bit different than season 1, because for the most part in season 1, when we were reviewing major arena events, pay-per-views, landmark shows for the most part, it was all about the matches on that show and, maybe some video packages that led to it, but mostly about the matches. Whereas if you're a fan of wrestling, weekly TV often is a mix of matches, interviews, recaps, and build to the next pay-per-view. And so I think that will all factor in, as it has in previous weeks on this season, to what we think of the show. Did they do a good job of, as you said, telling us where we are? And did they do a good job of making us excited about where they're going?
So Spike TV started airing TNA Impact on October 1st, 2005. 2 episodes were taped every other Tuesday, airing them on the subsequent Saturday. But because of viewership growth, Impact was moved to Thursdays in 2006, April of 2006 to be exact.
This show being in July is thankfully, as we were doing our research for this episode, 2 months before the reemergence of Vince Russo on the TNA creative team. He would be rejoining the company on September 21st, 2006, to be paired with Dutch Mantel and Jeff Jarrett on the TNA creative team. Ever since we realized that we were dumping TNA weekly TV into the randomizer, I was living in fear of getting Vince Russo Impact episodes, and we just barely dodged that bullet.
Yeah, we had to sit through a weekly pay-per-view with all of the worst of Vince Russo.
Do not remind the listeners, if you have not listened to that podcast yet, episode 2 of season 2, oh boy, you're in for, I don't know if I'd say a treat. You're in for an adventure, an odyssey. It will. I don't know if you as a listener will have the same thoughts that we did, where it led to some soul searching as to why am I a fan of this genre of entertainment?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, we're in 2006 and October of 2007. So less than a year from when this episode airs, the show would actually move to a 2-hour format. So the show was continuing to add viewers and grow, and they were rewarded by a better time slot on Thursdays, and then a 2-hour format.
That they were going to get that 2-hour format, because watching this episode, bit of a spoiler, bit of a preview, whet your appetite, it felt as though they were writing a 2-hour show that they pushed into 1 hour here.
Yeah, this show is still the 1-hour format. It did a 0.81 rating with just about 1 million viewers. And we get a video intro from the TNA logo here saying, "This is TNA, the new face of professional wrestling." Now,
how are they still the new face of professional wrestling? On a previous episode this season, we reviewed TNA Impact during their weird limbo period between Fox Sports and Spike TV. And at that point, in 2005 they were referring to themselves as the new face of professional wrestling.
Yeah, TNA at this point is neither new nor the face of professional wrestling.
No, and in a few short months with Vince Russo taking over, you could argue they were not professional wrestling either.
We get a recap of the Victory Road 2006 pay-per-view. And by recap, I mean very short video clips where I could pick up a few things here and there, but
Yes.
it was a whirlwind.
This was like an acid trip flashback scene in a really messed up TV show. I saw Sting. He had bandages over his eyes. Someone shaved someone's head, and a ref was laughing. Those were the two things that I took from this sequence of images that you called a recap.
So, yeah, so we've got this angle. Okay, so the main point was that Sting was blinded by Jeff Jarrett, who was dressed as a cameraman, and he threw gasoline in Sting's face. Sting would then come back later in the show, eye bandaged, won a match later, pinning Scott Steiner. And eventually
like a four-way involved Christian Cage and several other people, I believe.
Yeah, and he would have a stare down with Christian after the match. So that's what we know. So the show opens with Borash outside Sting's locker room, and he's going to get an update on Sting, although I'm pretty sure that the update is he's fine enough to win a match with a bandage on his eye. So he's okay. Will he come out later? We'll find out. Borash is standing there, and Sting's victory, he explains to us, means that he gets a title shot at the next pay-per-view called Hard Justice.
TNA pay-per-view name if there ever was one.
Yeah, Jay Lethal comes out of Sting's locker room, tells Borash that Sting doesn't want to be bothered, and so Borash asks him about his X Division title match later, and Jay Lethal says after talking to Sting, he's going to use his title opportunity to go for Jarrett and the NWA World title instead of the X Division title.
And the announcers go, like, throughout this show, they go nuts about, like, this is so unexpected. A couple things. If the X Division and all the competitors in the X Division, if it's all about no limits, no weight limits, that whole thing, then why is it a big shock that like Jay Lethal, who's maybe 25 pounds at most lighter than Jeff Jarrett, would choose to go after the world title instead of going after an X Division championship that he could probably get a title shot for at any time because he's one of the top guys in the division?
No, this felt, and a couple of times during this show, it felt like the X Division, which was main eventing show we recapped earlier in the season, is now, the X Division is now a second-class citizen to the heavyweight main event. There's the main eventers, the heavyweight division, the championship group, and then the X Division's kind of second-class citizens to them.
Well, and think about that Impact episode from 2005 that we reviewed earlier this season where they were building to an X Division championship match with Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, and Christopher Daniels, which would go on to be the greatest match in TNA history. Wrestling Observer 5-star match. Here, AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels, which we'll get to it later, they are the World Tag Team Champions. Samoa Joe has a feud beginning with another heavyweight, and the X Division title, like you said, is clearly positioned as, it's much closer to like the WWE Cruiserweight title in the mid 2000s than it is the X Division championship of, even a year prior or 2 or 3 years prior to that.
Yeah. So instead he's going to challenge Jeff Jarrett for the NWA World title, and
which I had completely forgotten that in 2006, I know we talked about it in the episode from 2005, but here in 2006, it was still the NWA World Championship and that old Harley Race NWA World title belt, that old Jack Briscoe Dory Funk belt. That's the one they were using here on Spike TV in 2006.
Yeah, what was more surprising to me was that how is TNA not successful when 3 random shows across a multi-year period that the randomizer has selected were all Jeff Jarrett in the title picture.
Well, yeah, honestly, as I was watching this show and I was, I'm like, wow, Sting was in the company at this time. They had Christian, who was, coming off a big WWE run. You had, like you said, the X Division guys like Styles and Daniel. Samoa Joe was really hot at this point. Rhino, a lot of guys. And there was, obviously that you could do podcasts, seasons of podcasts, full series of podcasts talking about TNA and where they went wrong. But I always firmly believe that you have when Jeff Jarrett is the fulcrum point of your company, when he's the focal point, and so he's the sun and everyone else orbits, you have a ceiling as to how far you can go, how big you can get.
Exactly. And it just felt the top story felt exactly the same across all three of these episodes we've reviewed so far.
I guess the only difference was that Jarrett had the belt and was trying to protect it by any means necessary instead of trying to get it, but still basically the same story.
The opening theme song plays. It's just super generic rock chords, lame.
Oh,
very
no,
lame
it's basically the opener and then the song they play over the end, which we'll talk to. It's basically, I really got the impression that Limp Bizkit was TNA's favorite band, but they couldn't afford them. Unlike the WWE. No. Go back to our WrestleMania 19 episode from season 1 if you need further details on that. After this video open, Mike Tenay screams that Impact is your 60-minute adrenaline rush. And I laughed because I had completely forgotten that was their tagline for their run on Spike TV. And at this point, I start having flashbacks again. Are we in the 2005 episode? I guess not, because this is happening inside of the ring instead of outside of Larry Zbyszko's office. But we see early on in the show, Shane Douglas. He is in the ring. He is wearing sunglasses. He is wearing yellow and black track pants, and he is wearing his old ECW franchise triple threat t-shirt.
Yeah, he's a manager now. Last time we saw Shane Douglas on a TNA show, he was a backstage interviewer. So he's a
moving
manager.
On up in the world a little bit, I guess.
But unfortunately, he's managing the Naturals, the newly franchised Naturals tag team here. They come out and they are still super generic and still lacking charisma.
Yeah, what being newly franchised means apparently is that you have like shoulder length hair instead of hair down past your shoulders. That's the difference in being newly franchised. Then at first it's confusing because Mike Tenay, like we see that they won their champion or they won their match at the pay-per-view. And Mike Tenay says that to the untrained eye, their match at Victory Road was an unqualified success. And then we see clips of post-match Shane Douglas, the franchise, berating them. And then we hear Tenay say that he's looking for perfection. And so what I'm gathering is that basically this gimmick is Shane Douglas playing famous college basketball coach Bobby Knight.
Yeah. Now, Shane Douglas is a million times better. He's such an upgrade from Jimmy Hart as the manager of the Naturals, which we saw last time we popped into a TNA show.
We know he's there. The last time we came across the Naturals on this podcast, they were managed by Jimmy Hart, just wearing a black suit and a black blazer, and
nothing
other than seeing him in the entrance and seeing him throw a brief fit at the end of the match. You would not have had any idea he existed on that show. Shane Douglas here, the best way I can describe it is, so Shane Douglas leaves. He does not stay ringside. That was his gimmick. He only would manage them before and after the match. And he was somehow still more active during the match than Jimmy Hart was on that previous episode of Impact.
Yeah, their opponents are Maverick Matt and Kazarian. Now,
I had to look this up. Maverick Matt, because he looked familiar to me, but he looked like bigger. And
I looked it up also because I'm like, who's this doughy guy with Frank Kazarian?
Maverick Matt is Matt Bentley. He of the Bentley Bounce. If you don't know what I'm talking about, one of the TNA folk legends in the Impact Zone, the Bentley Bounce. But he was formerly known as Michael Shane. And Michael Shane was one of the first trainees of Shawn Michaels at the, I believe it was the Texas Wrestling Academy, the same group that Spanky, Brian Kendrick came out of. The American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, who many of you know as Daniel Bryan, came out of that same class. And so that's who this is here. And then I had a flashback that, wow, like 2 years before this, I saw Michael Shane as one of the, I guess, one of the guys that ended up not making as big as some of those guys I mentioned that was on the 2004 IWA Mid-South Ted Petty Invitational, my all-time favorite wrestling weekend that I attended live. Michael Shane here as Maverick Matt.
Yeah, not only was Shawn Michaels his trainer, but also his cousin. So.
Oh, wow, that's right.
Now, they come out to a lame, generic theme song that we're told was written and recorded by Maverick Matt himself. So I make a note that I hope his wrestling career takes off, because his music career is not a fallback. It cannot be a fallback.
No.
But then I looked it up when I was looking up who he was. It also turned out I was wrong, because in 2009, his band Lost in Chaos was nominated for Florida's Best Band on a local rock station website. So they had fans.
Apparently. If you want to couch it that way, you could say that. The song, his intro song, was indistinguishable from the open for Impact. I assume it was not the same song, but yeah,
it's a common theme of TNA is how little effort they put into wrestler theme songs, which I feel are hugely important. If you've been a listener of this show, you know in season 1. A lot of times we talk about theme songs and they pop into the broadcast. Now it's a very important part of wrestling is the theme songs, and TNA seems to have put zero effort into anybody's music.
Very little effort. And the other thing that I always thought was weird was that so the music plays and then it immediately runs into the next guy's music. There's zero break between music for when opponents come out. Yes. In any event, this match starts with all four men brawling in the ring.
Before this starts, I noticed our ring announcer here is Dave Penzer,
the
old WCW ring announcer. And I make a note that Jeremy Borash in the previous shows we saw was a significantly better ring announcer than David Penzer. I don't know if that's a hot take, but that's my opinion.
Jeremy Borash is a guy that as the years went by, I came to appreciate much more. I could not stand him in the very early days of TNA, but as years went by, what I could actually say what turned it for me was seeing him. I talked about on previous episode of this podcast attending a TNA pay-per-view at the Impact Zone in 2007 and seeing how hard that guy worked the crowd and watching him watch the women's match from just off ringside, watching I believe it was the Gail Kim Awesome Kong match and how invested he was in that. I gained a new respect for him. And yeah, he's a perfectly fine ring announcer, which we'll actually get to hear from a little bit later on this show.
Like you mentioned before I cut you off, all four men start brawling immediately at the start. Kazarian gets dumped and the Naturals go to work on Maverick Matt. Tenay explains that Shane Douglas, as their manager, doesn't stay at ringside, and he leaves when the match starts. It's extremely weird. I felt it bizarre.
It's very weird, and it also doesn't make sense because if you really wanted to get this angle of him being the hard ass coach, like that Bobby Knight style coach manager, wouldn't you have him at ringside be rating his guys? I don't know. It was strange. I also thought it was strange that like my impression of the Naturals when they came out, when they showed that brief flashing image of them on the pay-per-view was that they were heels. But early on in the match, Chase Stevens gets a hot tag. So I guess they're faces here. Kaz and Matt Bentley are faces. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know either. And Andy Douglas off the ropes. Kazarian on the outside grabs his leg. Maverick Matt then slides out to the floor, holds Douglas's legs as he falls face first. Kazarian up and over the top into the ring, landing with a leg drop. And I'm seeing Kazarian doing all kinds of fun flippity-doos and jumping around, leg drops. And yeah, to me, they were totally the babyface team here.
Yeah. Kazarian looked great.
He did.
It's also noteworthy that during the entrances, Don West said that and this was an exact quote, that Maverick, Matt, and Kaz were previously the best team in the X division, and he said how excited he was that they're back together. I have zero recollection, A, of this team, and B, of them being the top team in the X division. And I was watching TNA back then, so I don't know. I guess it didn't stand out.
That makes one of us, and so I've never heard of Maverick Matt or Frank Kazarian as a team. This is new to me. So hearing that they were a team reuniting, I felt like, okay, well, they've got a good shot to win this match as the returning team here. But we'll find out that this match was a little confusing in how it was booked. So after the commercial.
Right.
Maverick Matt with a backbreaker. He's holding Douglas across his knee. Kazarian comes in with a springboard leg drop. Douglas, at this point, makes the hot tag to Chase Stevens, who then beats up Kazarian and Matt.
It was very strange, but that move was awesome. If you can imagine, it's basically the demolition finisher, but instead of coming off the second rope with an axe handle, you're springboarding off the top rope with a leg drop. Very cool. And like I said, I thought, like, Bentley, Maverick Matt, whatever you want to call him, he was fine. Kazarian looked awesome here. He looked great.
The Naturals go for their finishing move, which is like a top rope drop kick into a powerbomb thing. And Douglas is on the top rope for it, but Kazarian kicks him, crotching Douglas on the top rope. Matt with a German suplex to Chase as Kazarian hits a clothesline at the same time. Kazarian goes to the top. He goes for a superplex on Douglas, but Douglas counters and dumps Kazarian off the top rope all the way to the floor.
Yeah, hard into the guardrail. And that would be a theme on this show for the few matches that we had that got any time. Guys went off the top rope hard into the guardrail.
Douglas still on the top rope. The Naturals are able to hit their finisher, that top rope drop kick, by one Natural as Chase Stevenson hits a sit-out powerbomb for the pin.
By one Natural. We're back to Natural A and Natural B here. Your disdain for the Naturals just seeps through.
It's on a scale of 1 to Greg the Hammer Valentine, it's still like a 5. Yeah. So Shane Douglas comes out to celebrate with the Naturals, but no, he's there to berate them. He smacks Chase. Yells at him. He says,
"You're on your back most of the match. You should never be in the position to get pinned.
Your shoulder should never touch the damn mat." So his character is never satisfied.
Yes, and he was saying that in Shane Douglas' voice, which is great. This match was fine. I didn't mind it at all, other than the fact that the heels were acting like baby faces in the match with the baby faces. But clearly what they were building to here was, the Naturals eventually getting fed up with Shane Douglas and turning on him and going face. Also, just a quick note, because we did say Douglas several times. Shane Douglas and Andy Douglas, no relation.
We see highlights of the Sting blinding heroic return at the Victory Road pay-per-view.
Before that, we see the announce desk, and we see Mike Tenay in his full penguin suit. Is full, looking like he's ready to be Batman's butler. And Don West looks quite dapper by Don West standards.
Very much so.
The hair is more tightly trimmed. He's got a nice shirt. He's got a tie that matches the shirt. He has come into his own here by 2006 from a visual presentation.
No, and he's a totally fine professional wrestling broadcast announcer. This team is in a groove at this point.
Yeah, they're great. Just like we talked about from that 2005 episode, they're awesome. Tenay knows everything, can communicate well, and then Don West is just the guy who is so enthusiastic about everything he's seeing because he recently fell in love with pro wrestling.
Borash is in the back. He's outside Sting's locker room again. Eric Young sneaks up on Borash wearing a "Don't Fire Eric" t-shirt. Eric needs an idea from Borash, but Borash gets interrupted. We don't get to hear this idea. So
what happens is Borash is clearly, obviously characterized. Borash is annoyed by Eric Young here, and so Borash, it seems like they're playing this for comedy, and that Borash is saying we have to go back to the desk so that he doesn't have to deal with Eric Young anymore. But then we go back to the desk, And there was actually a reason to go, because the NWA World Champion is here at the broadcast table, and he asks Mike Tenay and Don West, quote, he says, "Do I look stupid?" And I immediately write down, yes you do.
100%.
All caps. The best way I can describe the look, the fashion report, and it's more than just a fashion report here. Jeff Jarrett, he has very blonde hair. He has a very red face. He is wearing a shirt that, like, over and over transitions from the same shade of red of his face and the same shade of red of his hair. It is incredible, and it is incredibly distracting.
Scott Steiner is with him, and he's looking as Scott Steiner does with his chainmail headdress there. And
he's got the Superstar Graham, Jesse Ventura throwback chainmail, and he's looking like Scott Steiner. He's looking like a Scott Steiner that's probably more well-served at this point to be somebody's enforcer, though, than to be in the ring.
Oh, yeah, I was shocked to see in the highlight package that he was still trying to wrestle here, that he was still trying to go at this point. Sting, he was explaining, Jarrett was ranting about how Sting conned Jay Lethal into taking this title match.
This is where it really started to feel like the other TNA episodes we've watched and reviewed, in that even though he was the champion here, it was still all about Jeff Jarrett saying that the world was out to get him. Thankfully, we did not hear anything about reverse discrimination.
Not this time.
Like we did on that 2000, was it 2004?
Yeah,
whenever that was.
2, yeah.
We did not hear anything about reverse discrimination like in the weekly TNA pay-per-view number 8. But it was basically the same message, just a little sanitized here. He said that Sting is conning Jay Lethal into taking a match he can't win. But then at the same time, he's saying that Sting is going to like cost him the belt. By far, my favorite part of this is Mike Tenay very aggressively and very stridently telling Jarrett to get in his ring gear because you have a world title match tonight. Indignant Mike Tenay is the best.
What was not the best is this segment, because I have no idea what's going on.
I love this. We are going to disagree because, again, I was watching Impact back then, and the whole thing was that, like, Kevin Nash had decided that he was going to go after the X Division title since it was, it wasn't about weight limits, it was about no limits, and he had hooked up with Alex Shelley, and I don't remember who the other random guy was.
I don't know who that dude was. Some guy with long blonde hair. Someone on Twitter will let us know who.
Yes,
who that
but this was Alex Shelley's paparazzi broadcasting, paparazzi TV, whatever it was.
Spy paparazzi broadcasting.
Yes, it was great. They did these segments quite often. Alex Shelley and Kevin Nash had great comedic timing.
They did. I enjoyed it. I just had no idea what was happening.
Well, yeah. For me, I remember in the moment, it was so great. And it felt, again, as someone who's never done drugs, I imagine this pairing is what drugs feel like. Because, like, back then, I was seeing Alex Shelley at, like, IWA, Ring of Honor, like, seeing him on indie shows and seeing him like getting tapes from Japan and watching him wrestle in 0-1. And then here he is, like, riffing with Kevin Nash every week backstage about the X Division. And really the whole story of this skit, this vignette, is that Nash says that he needs to get in the head of an X Division star so he can know how to compete against them. And Alex Shelley tells him that, he's gotten him tapes from Mexico, from Japan, from Madagascar. And so they're watching the tapes, but we don't see the screen. We see them looking at a screen that we can't see. And so they're reacting. Alex Shelley talks about someone in the match from Mexico hitting a spaceman tornado arm drag, and Kevin's taking notes. Kevin then talks about seeing someone do a double reverse ninja kick.
I did like the note taking. I thought that was funny. Nash's facial expressions of like intently trying to study this was great.
Absolutely. They talk about seeing a two-sided ring.
Yeah.
And Alex Shelley says, this is Madagascar. Anything goes. They talk about, Kevin Nash is completely offended by the fact there are only 300 people at the show in Madagascar. And I'm thinking, wow, Kevin, you definitely haven't worked the indies. We then see that, Alex Shelley says that he's going to fly the wrestlers from Madagascar personally into the Impact Zone in business class. And at this point, Kevin stands up and says, shut the front door, which was, again, just great comedic timing. Kevin Nash and Alex Shelley hug. Alex Shelley says, "Hold me." And then the camera zooms in, and Alex Shelley is obviously being squeezed, and he says, "You're holding me too tight." And Nash is like, "Yeah, I guess I am." And then we go to the next segment.
He calls him son, which was great.
Yes, this made me so happy. This is one of those things that I had completely forgotten about. And seeing this here, it was an enjoyable way to spend about 90 seconds.
It looked like everyone involved was having tons of fun with it.
Exactly.
So I enjoyed it, but I have no idea what's happening. And it's one of those things when Nash is involved and it's super fun, that it could completely go sideways and ruin everybody. So I don't know how the whole thing played out, but hopefully it was good for the X Division fellas and good for Alex Shelley.
Spoiler, it was not, but
shocking.
Entertaining segments, because like you said, it was something like this. It's going to be funny, but it could also end in Kevin Nash ending Goldberg's streak after Scott Hall pays cattle prod. That's how this can go. But in a vacuum here, as we parachute into weekly TV, this made me very happy.
Very fun. Next up, which was also fun, we see the War Machine Rhino. I was not aware that he had this nickname. His opponent, jobber named Robert Adams. So.
Well, yes, but there's more to this in that this guy who is unnamed at first, we see Rhino run to the ring. We see this guy in the ring, and we don't see his face. And what I note is that this guy is a smaller version of Rhino. He's wearing the exact same style gear, except it's red. Like it's note for note Rhino's gear, just smaller and red. And then he turns around and he's like a husky 12-year-old. But it is, yeah. And then we are off to the races here. You can imagine in the match featuring the War Machine Rhino versus local competitor, jobber, wimp guy, Robert Adams. What would happen?
Rhino starts the match by taking this guy's head off with a clothesline. Immediately a gore, which is Rhino's spear, gets the 3 count. Quick squash. The place went crazy for Rhino coming out, for Rhino destroying this guy, and for Rhino post-match. He was so popular. I'm like, he was in the main event scene last time we saw this. He's way more popular now. How is he not in the main event picture? I was shocked that they're not doing anything with him.
It's funny. Rhino is one of those perfect examples of a guy who spent a ton of time in TNA, was in the main event scene for a while, was over the whole time he was there, and was there for so much longer than he was in ECW. But you think of him as an ECW guy. And there's so many of those TNA guys that are like, oh God, like they spent like 5, 6, 8 years of their career there. And you still don't really even, you don't bat an eye or you don't think about it. I was also amused by this match was so short that Mike Tenay was not even able to get out his information about Bound for Glory coming to Detroit, as it's the first time TNA takes their pay-per-views on the road. Like that, the amount of time it took me to say that is twice as long as it took Rhino to destroy Robert Adams.
The only thing I didn't like here is the referee is wearing shorts. I found that to be referee Slick
Johnson. He was a wacky character, and definitely a TNA referee.
Rhino with the mic after says he wants competition, which brings out Samoa Joe, and I got excited. So did the crowd. They're chanting, "Joe's gonna kill you," and Joe comes out on the entranceway, and Rhino
with decent music by TNA standards, by the way. And at least his music started. It was like a generic knockoff of the Champ is Here music that he used on the Indies and in ROH, and it basically starts that way at least, so hear it. It signals Samoa Joe's coming out instead of like generic new metal that signals any of 30 other guys on the roster are coming out.
No, when we talk about the theme song power rankings of TNA, Samoa Joe is at
grading
the top.
Grading on a roller coaster level curve.
Yeah, it's definitely at the top. When his music hit, the crowd starts immediately chanting, "Joe's going to kill you," and it was a great entrance. He says that he wants Rhino and challenges him to a fight at Hard Justice.
Well, this starts with Rhino saying that he threw out an extreme challenge, apparently at some point before this episode of Impact, but he wanted more competition than guys like Robert Adams. That's when Joe came out. Also have to note, Joe's face was bruised up bad.
A huge bruise on his forehead and the bridge of his nose. Yeah, he got messed up at some point. Oof.
I felt like like it was 1995 and he encountered the wrong crew outside of a nightclub in Syracuse.
Go back to episode 1 of season 1 to get a recap of that one. He talked to Jim Cornette, who must be an authority figure.
There's a lot of authority figures running around because we find out later that Larry Zbyszko is still an authority figure.
He's still here.
This executive committee has a lot of pro wrestling luminaries such as Larry Zbyszko and James E. Cornette, who we do not see on this show, but we do hear about.
Yeah, they won't wait for the pay-per-view. In fact, they will fight next week. Rhino says, let's do it now. Joe runs down. Security keeps them apart. It was a good pull apart. I did not see Don Harris. Looks like he's no longer head of security.
Yes.
But next week...
I also noted that they attempted to bleep Rhino saying we're gonna kick each other's effing ass right now.
Yeah, they
bleeped others and right, but everything in between made it straight through and was still here on the Impact Plus streaming service some 14 years later.
Yeah, next week's will be Battle of the Machines, War Machine versus the Samoan Submission Machine.
And man, do I wish we pulled next week's show because I want to see Rhino versus Samoa Joe.
Yeah, these two guys are awesome. And Rhino is way more beloved than I've ever seen Rhino loved in his career. I couldn't believe it. So popular.
It was like a whole segment of a sustained crowd reaction of him going through that shopping cart at Backlash.
Borash is backstage with Brother Runt of Team 3D, the former Spike Dudley.
We have to point out, because this is one of the worst aspects of TNA, really throughout their entire history, is that they'll do something really really noteworthy or like something that should really linger and sink in for a few seconds. And instead it's just immediately to the back.
Yes.
And that's what happened here. We had Rhino and Samoa Joe, this like crazy, violent pull apart. And then immediately we're to the back with Jeremy Borash and the former Spike Dudley, Brother Runt, now of Team 3D, which is what they call the Dudleys. And in walk, did they call him Brother Ray then?
Brother Ray and Brother Devon.
Yes, Brother Ray and Brother Devon. They tell Borash he can leave or sit down and shut up. And he says, I'd quite like to stay. And then they just force him to sit down. I enjoyed that little moment.
The James gang apparently put Runt through a table and they lost.
God. The James gang, that being BG James and Kip James, the former New Age Outlaws of Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, who have the same last name in TNA but are not brothers.
We learn at this point that AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels are the current tag team champions, and we learn that the Dudleys, they're going to leave for some reason. I don't pick up on why, but they're leaving, and they tell Runt to hold it down for them while they're gone, and maybe he should go after the X Division title.
Well, I believe the situation was, and I could be mistaken, but I believe the situation was that they were potentially going to All Japan for the World Tag League in All Japan, which was always towards the end of the year, and back then and still now. They were semi-regulars in All Japan before they joined, before they did a bunch of New Japan shots later in the decade. So I'm assuming, if my memory serves me correctly, that's what was going on.
Borash in the back with America's Most Wanted and Gail Kim. James...
Well, you completely skipped over everything that happened in that promo. There's some weird stuff in this backstage promo
with the Dudleys.
With the Dudleys, they're talking about they don't like losing. They talk about they lost, like you said, to the James game. They lost to Abyss. They talk about that they basically like they're not threatening Spike Brother Runt, but they are threatening Brother Runt. They are absolutely threatening. They're saying they're gonna take some time off after 12 years. They tell him that he needs to behave himself, stay out of people's way, and hold it down for the family until they return. And then Bubba just sort of dismissively says, should go after that X Division title. That would be perfect for you." And then as they leave, Brother Runts just looks at the camera and kind of gives the sly grin and sly laugh. Good backstage segment, but I will say that it does kind of play into what you said about the X Division. Is basically these guys were calling it in kind of shrouded language, calling it a joke of a title, and that's why their younger brother should go after the belt.
Yeah, another thing TNA did here is all their guys when they're not wrestling are in street clothes.
Yes,
and this did Spike Dudley no favors.
No, true. But from a logic standpoint, which we've talked about on previous episodes, if you're not wrestling, why would you be walking around in your wrestling gear?
Yeah, it's because Spike Dudley looks like a normal dude when he's not in wrestling gear. Put him in wrestling gear. Now we have Boresh talking to America's Most Wanted and Gail Kim. Storm's drinking from a bottle of beer, and America's Most Wanted are arguing. Gail Kim basically says, "Hey, all you guys are arguing because of Sarita?
Sorelda. I have no idea who she was talking about. I have no recollection of this, but she wants to fight Sorelda.
Hard justice.
Hard justice. And the one thing about this backstage promo is that it confirms everything that we thought and talked about on the previous Impact episode where we see America's Most Wanted, in that there are two men in this team. One of them has charisma, one of them doesn't, and it's very easy to see which one of those two men has charisma. It is not Chris Harris.
No, and I feel like they really wanted Chris Harris to have the charisma.
Yes. That is a hallmark of the career of Chris Harris, even when he had his very short run in the WWE. I think, wasn't he in the WWE version of ECW very briefly?
I think so, yeah.
He had some wacky name. They gave him a singlet, Wildcat, and it lasted like a week.
Yeah, so fun fact about Gail Kim, she's married to celebrity chef Robert Irvine. AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels come out. They're in their street clothes. They're here for an interview, your World Tag Team Champions. Now, I do want to make mention, AJ Styles' music here is not great, but on the power rankings of TNA music, it's second best behind Samoa Joe, I think.
And I would say that that's on the all-time, the TNA Mount Rushmore of entrance music. It's basically, there's music behind it, and it's like, you are, I am, over and over and over again. But again, imagine that being good, and then imagine what that must mean about the rest of the entrance music we have here.
Yeah, so I like that. They had a bunch of signed contracts with them, a contract for every team in TNA.
They brought out a manila envelope. They were here. AJ Styles had like a Kmart Affliction shirt and baggy jeans. Yeah. He looked like he was ready to rock your ears off at a Christian rock festival. Meanwhile, Chris Daniels was dressed to the nines with his black dress pants, his white suit. He looked like a waiter at a really high-end restaurant. And yeah, they had a manila envelope and manila folder with a bunch of envelopes. Each one had a signed title shot for each team in the company. Basically, the idea was that they said that the boys in the back don't like that they are the tag team champions. And so they are going to prove, I guess, to the boys in the back that they are an actual tag team. They show contracts or envelopes with contracts for the Naturals. I'm sure that got you fired up.
Well, yeah, they started with Team 3D first.
Will not be here, so
they said that yeah, it'll be waiting for them when they get back. The James Gang, the Naturals, Christian Cage and Sting. Speaking of natural tag teams,
absolutely not a Battle Bowl team, shockingly.
And then at this point, Conan grabs a mic. He's at the Spanish announce table over at that position where apparently his team LAX is set up shop. They've took over the Spanish announce position.
Yes, exactly. And he is great here. He talks about the gringos being overrated. He doesn't believe them. It kind of progresses where Well, first Styles gets really like angry, and it was felt out of place because nothing had happened yet for him to get so angry, and he just screams, "Shut up!" There's an envelope for LAX, and Conan just does not believe them, even though like as each layer gets removed and it's more and more obvious there's a contract. He has a great line after he says there is no contract in the envelope. He says, "If they ever have the pantalones, LAX will be all over them like a monkey on a cupcake."
He did.
I do not know what any of this means, but it entertained me greatly.
No, I love it. We'll be all over you like a monkey on a cupcake. I love it. Now, this LAX incarnation is Homicide and Hernandez as the Latin American exchange.
Yes, Homicide, the longtime ROH and independent star, and Hernandez is the giant muscle of the team. There's a great moment where so Daniels is in the ring, as you said. Conan is all the way in the Spanish broadcast booth. Daniels takes the contract out of the envelope and holds it up, and Conan just casually says, "Yo, am I supposed to read that from here?" And I cackled. That made me very happy. It was very funny, just casual humor. And then Daniels goes over along with AJ Styles to hand deliver the contract.
And Conan asks for a pin. Styles hands it to him, but Conan drops it, says, "Oops, my bad," as LAX jumps AJ and Daniels right there at the announce table.
Daniels was so great here. Like there's a moment where he realizes what's about to happen and he kind of like tries to get AJ's attention, but before he even can, they're already getting beat down. Daniels was awesome here.
Everybody was awesome here. Homicide hits Daniels with a slapjack, just spits on him when he's on the ground. Hernandez presses Styles over his head, drops him face first right across the apron.
This was like a press slam, snake eyes, but into the edge of the apron. Maybe if it was not Hernandez doing it and not AJ Styles taking it, it wouldn't have looked as violent and as impressive as it did.
No, AJ took a beating here, and Daniels took a beating here. This was awesome. In the ring, Homicide gets AJ he hits him with his Gringo Killer. Describe this move, Adam. This was the way AJ took this. He took it like he broke his neck. It was phenomenal.
If you recall, if you listened to our Greed 2001 show, or you went back as well and watched that show, Shane Helms did the same move, the Vertebreaker, to Chavo Guerrero Jr. Chavo took it a lot more safely than AJ Styles did here.
He did.
He landed directly on his head and neck. Again, had a ton of experience taking this move when it was known as the Cop Killer on the Indies when Homicide would do this. But this was violent, nasty stuff. He took that move, and then we see on the floor, Hernandez is just like holding Daniels. Daniels is bleeding all over the place, and again, because Chris Daniels is a great man, a smart professional wrestler, as well as whoever put the segment together, Daniels was wearing that white shirt,
so dress the blood shirt covered in blood.
Classic Ric Flair style thing here. The blood just drenches that shirt, and it makes the visual all that much more impressive and memorable. They signed the contract for the championship match with the blood of Chris Daniels. And this is my immediate thought was, man, here's something somewhat similar to what we saw with that whole wacky Disciples of the New Church thing. Blood getting all over everybody. But this just felt violent and gritty and real and scary, whereas that just made you laugh.
Yes, that was completely ridiculous. This was extremely serious. This was Conan out of this world awesome. This was Homicide and Hernandez putting on a great beating here, and nobody takes a beating like AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels as a consummate professional. This was awesome. This was a great angle, and it was so well done. I forgot I was watching TNA for a minute. This was a really well done angle and a great segment.
No, this was incredible. This felt like I was 5 years old watching NWA World Championship Wrestling on TBS on a Saturday night. That's what this felt like. It was fantastic.
So good.
The only thing that was not great and what immediately made me realize, oh, yeah, I'm watching 2006 TNA is that we got approximately a millisecond to let this beating really sink in before we went to the back.
Yeah,
for JB.
We didn't get to see, security leading away LAX while doctors and others tend to AJ and Daniels in the ring. We didn't see any of that because it's as soon as this stuff, you don't let it sink in. They don't force you to sit in it for a minute and think about what you just saw. You get no time to process it, like you mentioned, straight to the back.
It's incredible because how you could have like a creative team that on one hand could put together such a perfect pro wrestling segment to make you want to see a match, but then also could have such terrible pro wrestling instincts to then just immediately go from this violent scene to the back to have Jeremy Borash standing by an open door.
It's Sting's locker room. The door's open. Sting is gone. But Larry Zbyszko shows up. Quick fashion corner for Larry Zbyszko.
Oh my.
He's got on a blue Hawaiian shirt with white palm trees on it.
That's exactly what you'd expect Larry Zbyszko to be wearing post AWA. This is his forever clothing on pro wrestling television from about the mid 90s on.
Yeah,
but there's a notable difference in the styling of Larry Zbyszko here.
He has on a completely absurd looking toupee. This hairpiece is ridiculous.
This is like Kurt. I was looking for the headgear because this was like Kurt Angle's hairpiece from early 2000s WWF.
He says that he's still on the championship committee, and Jim Cornette is dropping the ball, so he's trying to make a power play for Cornette's position. And then a referee comes up.
It's your guy, Slick Johnson.
Is this the guy at the shorts guy? So
this is the shorts guy. This is Slick Johnson. And when I immediately see him, what a name, by the way. It's no Scrappy McGowan, but still, I see him and I'm like, oh yeah, that's from that acid trip video package that we had at the beginning. This is the guy, the referee who was laughing in the face of Larry Zbyszko. And we put together that, yes, Larry Zbyszko had his head shaved. I didn't know during one of the matches earlier, very just like nonchalantly, the announcers mentioned that Raven defeated Larry Zbyszko at the pay-per-view. And because of that, Larry Zbyszko had his head shaved. And you talked about where Rhino was like a year later from that Impact 2005 show. How about Raven? Raven went from being the NWA World Heavyweight Champion in that awesome feud with Sabu and Abyss and that whole deal to here he apparently was in a hair match with Larry Zbyszko.
Yeah, Larry calls him Slick and he walks away, but this segment was great because everyone was ignoring the hairpiece.
Yes,
and I loved it. Everybody was serious, going about their business. Borash, Zbyszko, everyone was pretending like there wasn't a hilarious hairpiece here. And then they ruin it by having this stupid referee come up and just laugh at the end and completely ruined it.
A microcosm of TNA in so many ways. So much potential, and then just pop the balloon.
After commercial, we get a Bobby Roode video package. He's on his own. He's left Team Canada, and he calls out pretty much all of the main eventers on the roster.
Also, Jeff Jarrett, Samoa Joe, Christian Cage, Sting. He tells them that be served, that Bobby Roode is here. Then he has a great line, even though we talked about the whole TNA tagline being kind of the sell-by date being gone. Still, this was good. TNA is the new face of wrestling, and you're looking at the new face of TNA.
The main event for the NWA World Championship, the challenger, Jay Lethal, versus the champion, Jeff Jarrett. We're told that Jay Lethal is the youngest guy on the roster.
He's only 20 years old.
He's 20 years old here, 2-0, and he comes out to the most generic techno music ever. Again, no effort put into this at all. And
he also, we hear again about how he won a match to get a shot at any championship he wanted, but we never thought he'd go after the NWA World title. Why?
Why wouldn't?
Why? This would be, if you're one of the Big Audio Nightmare listeners, this would be like someone winning the G1 and then choosing, no, I don't want the IWGP World title. I'm going to grab two partners and we're going to go after the never open weight 6-man tag titles. Of course, you're going to go after the world title.
And here we also see Borash doing the ring announcing for the title match. Is it because it's a title match or a main event? Does he do all the main events? I don't know what the
championship matches, if I remember correctly, and it was, this was right at the, the kind of the high point of like UFC's exploding popularity. So they had they waited for the entrance music to be over, did the intros with both guys in the ring at the same time since it was a title match. I also noted that, again, this tiny soundstage, and I've been in it, it was small. Jeff Jarrett had so much pyro coming out. Again, I guess when you're the guy, you're the owner, you're one of the owners, you're the guy that created the company, Dixie's going to give you a lot of pyro.
Still, way too much pyro for an indoor tiny arena. 100%. Jarrett's on the second rope holding up the belt during his ring introduction, and Lethal sneaks up, grabs him in a powerbomb position, drops him with a powerbomb as the bell rings to start the match.
Yes, I kind of like to think of it as the force of the powerbomb caused the bell to ring, because it was one immediately after the other. And yeah, we were off to the races here as the young upstart Jay Lethal is looking to get a quick win and win the NWA World title.
He was going a million miles an hour here, hitting Jarrett with tons of stuff early. He nails a perfect flying elbow off the top rope.
Well, before he hits that, the whole thing, it's really cool because like he hits that powerbomb, gets the two, the bell rings, and then immediately it's flying forearms, body slam, like you said, that top rope elbow, long two. The announcers are freaking out. Then we get several sequences where Jarrett battles to the floor, and Lethal, it's not like he follows him and chases him. Like, as Jarrett is battling to the floor, Lethal goes over or through the ropes and gets to the floor at the same time Jarrett does, and immediately throws him back in to go for more chances to win the belt.
Yes.
Very, very cool.
Every single time, that's the story. Jarrett tries to run away, but every time he goes outside for a break, Lethal slid out the first time. He's out there right with him, hits him, throws him back in the ring. Lethal to the top rope, hits a crossbody for a near fall, and the place almost bought it for a minute.
Yeah, and the announcers, this is where like Mike Tenay is his usual good Mike Tenay self. Don West is just incredible in this match. Don West, like if you could tell Don West, like there's three options. Like you can see your firstborn child be born. You can win the lottery, or you can see Jay Lethal win the world title. He's going option C here.
Jarrett again tries to retreat to the outside. Lethal, relentless. He's right out after him again. But coming back into the ring, it allows Jarrett to catch Lethal coming in, gives him his first advantage in the match. It is short-lived as Jarrett slides out to punch Lethal, who's leaning against the ropes with his head through the ropes. But
he's basically channeling the big boss man here.
Yes. So he slides out to go punch Lethal, but it gets countered, and Lethal ends up hitting a tope, wiping out Jarrett.
Yes, Jay Lethal, even back then, one of the best suicide dives, one of the best topes in all of wrestling. I would say Jay Lethal and Bushi of New Japan fame. And if we're going way back in the day, Owen Hart had a great tope where he went more sideways through and always cleared it perfectly. But yeah, this was great. And Lethal, like you said, he keeps coming back. He's on the offense here. And at this point, though, we see Scott Steiner coming down the ring with the lead pipe coming down the entranceway. And then Jay Lethal gets on the top rope. And at that point, we see something we saw earlier on in the show.
Yeah, Jarrett shoves him off, and he crashes and burns to the outside, hitting the guardrail again hard.
Even harder, I would say, than in that Naturals match in the opener. This was even more of a violent fall. And at that point, we go to a commercial break. We come back, and they're still on the floor. Jeff Jarrett is throwing him into the rail on the entranceway.
Yeah, we're told that Jarrett's been in control the whole time through the commercial. We see Lethal go hard into the guardrail again. Steiner presses Lethal over his head, dumping him back into the ring.
I note at that point, it was really impressive, but we just saw Hernandez do that like
exactly
8 minutes ago. So maybe have some other way to get him back in the ring.
Huge backdrop by Jarrett. You felt like Lethal was never going to land on this backdrop.
This was like there are people who have taken superplexes, I'm trying to think other moves off the top rope that have not landed from as high of a distance as Jay Lethal did from the apex of this backdrop down to the mat. This was I've said it a few times. His feet scraped the surface of the moon on this one. It was wild.
I'm always surprised when I see Jeff Jarrett land a high drop kick. Like, he just I forget, and then every time I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, he does do that. But it's always impressive to see. He nails one drop here. Kick.
Again, like the other thing to note with Jeff Jarrett, he for the longest time, he's a guy who he looks exactly the same. Like he in 2006 looks exactly the same as he did in 2005, looks exactly the same as he did in 2004, looks exactly the same as he did in 2000 at Bash at the Beach. He does not look as though he's aged. He's wearing the same gear. He is in exactly the same shape.
Lethal reverses a figure four attempt into a figure four of his own on Jarrett.
Not the like figure four and then roll over and reversal. He counters the figure four with a figure four. I had to rewind it a few times to actually make sure I understood how that happened.
Steiner then pulls Jarrett by the arms from the middle of the ring, all the way dragging him to the ropes. The ref sees this and yells about it. And while he's yelling at Steiner, Lethal does a flip dive over Jarrett, over the top rope, wiping out Steiner on the outside.
It was awesome. And Don West completely, I cannot do justice. He completely loses it. He starts screaming and making loud sounds. I don't think they're actual words. He's just so excited. I can't blame him. This was an awesome spot. I did note, though, that when the ref catches Steiner physically pulling Jarrett to the ropes while Jarrett's in the figure four, his reaction to this is roughly akin to late stage WCW referees and their reactions to low blows.
Yeah, exactly.
They see them, but it doesn't bother them.
Springboard drop kick by Lethal back into the ring. Lethal then hits a diving headbutt off the top rope.
TNA calls it the diving dynamite, obviously an homage of the Dynamite Kid.
Yeah, Jarrett barely just rolls his shoulder up, doesn't kick out at all here.
This was a great near fall, a long two. And this is one of those where like the presentation of this match to this point is so good and everybody in it is so good that even though like your like smart wrestling fan mind is telling you there's not going to be a title change, there's no way this is going to happen, you catch yourself biting on some of these near falls.
Yeah, Lethal blocks an attempt. Jarrett goes for the stroke. It gets blocked. He goes to the top rope, but Steiner on the apron hits Lethal in the back with the pipe, crotching Lethal on the top rope.
At this point, before we get to the finish, can we talk about how impossibly lame of a move the stroke is?
It's absolutely a terrible move. This is the Miz had this finisher.
A version of it is the skull crushing finale. At least with the Miz's version, I can live with it a little bit more because you get your opponent in his version. You get your opponent in a full Nelson, then step off to the side and drive your opponent down to the mat. Here, it's as though you are going for like an inverted side Russian leg sweep, but grab your opponent by the hair and then just throw him face first to the mat. Like this would be fine if it was a transition move akin to the Triple H counter to the backdrop where he kind of drives you down face first to his knee. It would be fine as that, but as a finisher and a world championship finisher, it is impossibly bad. It is roughly equivalent to the Bubba Bomb.
Now, yeah, Jarrett joins Lethal here on the second turnbuckle, and then he hits Lethal with the stroke off the ropes. Jarrett gets the 3 count, and David Penzer announces the winner and still champion. What happened to Borash?
Yeah, that was weird. I don't know if like Borash should. I mean, it's TNA, so you always have to be going to the back if you're a ring announcer or if you're a interviewer. So maybe that was that. Maybe they added the Penzer thing in post production because this was a taped show. Either way, Jeff Jarrett retains. Mike Tenay starts screaming about how Jarrett was gutless on Sunday, and now he has Scott Steiner doing his dirty work as Scott Steiner puts the Steiner recliner on Jay Lethal, and then the lights go out.
While Steiner has him in the camel clutch there, the Steiner recliner, Jarrett is taunting Lethal with the belt, which was a nice touch. Yeah, lights go out. When they come back on, Sting is in the ring. He's attacking Steiner and Jarrett. Sting is choking Jarrett in the corner as the show goes off the air.
He's choking him as like 10 security guys are trying to pull him off. You get a great camera shot from the floor in the corner of Sting double hand choking Jarrett like so hard that he's pushing Jarrett through the ropes. Like a great visual, but then immediately, again, this awesome, like really cool visual that you know, we want to see where it's going to go. Immediately, though, we go to a hyper fast video recap of what we just saw on the show with some song called Adrenaline Rush that is clearly a Limp Bizkit cover band performing this song.
Yes, we have to note here that Sting had no eye patch, no bandage, and no real damage from gasoline to the eye. Yes. I feel like that should have still been a problem. Editor. Yeah.
Well, it's weird, too, because, again, the same company that put together that awesome old school angle with LAX and Daniels and AJ Styles here had just an obvious continuity hole of, yes, if you had gasoline thrown in your eyes that led you to have your whole head bandaged up, to just, a mere 4 days later, there should have at least been some semblance.
An eye patch, something.
Yes.
Sting with an eye patch. Could have been a cool look. But no.
Exactly. Or he runs down the ring with sunglasses and then throws the sunglasses off and goes at him. Something to at least show that you're acknowledging that had happened.
No, you just have to flush the eye out with some water. Like
there you go.
Like Andy in The Office.
Absolutely. Very good reference.
So the show is over, and it wasn't bad at all. I actually enjoyed a lot of it.
The show isn't over. You must have turned it off while the Adrenaline Rush song was playing, which I can't blame you for.
That's the end, right?
It is not. After that song ended, we go to the back.
Stop it. There was something after that. I literally turned it off because I'm like, I just watched this. Why am I going to watch this recap?
Yes, well, I'm sure a lot of people are like that, and they did not see this like 8th backstage segment with Jeremy Borash and Christian. Christian is trying to get into Jim Cornette's office. He says that he wants to even the playing field, and he wants to be in Sting's corner at Hard Justice when Sting takes on Jeff Jarrett for the world title. I don't know. I haven't looked this up. I don't recall, but if I had to guess, that probably leads to Christian turning on Sting at the pay-per-view, screwing over Sting, and helping Jarrett win the title.
Yeah, so like I said, this show was not bad at all. I enjoyed it. I had to look it up, and apparently we got lucky with the randomizer here, as there was some horrible TVs around this time, but this was not one of them. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was perfectly fine. It was like, if you compare it to that 2005 Impact show that we reviewed earlier in the season, there was a lot more going on here. It was definitely a bit more frantically paced of a show. But it was far better than the weekly pay-per-view that we reviewed from TNA earlier in this season. And yeah, I mean, my only real complaints weren't with like any of the stuff that they did as far as like segments self-contained. My only real complaint was just that they didn't let these awesome angles breathe, and they just cut them off at the knees by going backstage immediately.
Favorite thing on the show for you?
I would say for sure my favorite thing on the show was Kevin Nash and Alex Shelley. It was the most welcome surprise on the show, without a doubt. Without a doubt, my favorite thing on the show was the whole LAX, AJ Styles, Chris Daniels segment. That was awesome. That was everything I want from weekly episodic television outside of the immediate to the back at the end.
That was an awesome angle. I enjoyed the main event as well. The pace of that match was, it was like if Jeff Jarrett had to wrestle an indie match. So it was just going. I enjoyed that a lot. But that angle was absolutely the best thing on the show. Worst thing on the show for you?
Oof, worst thing on the show. That's a good question. I do want to briefly go back to just that match. I would say that's definitely the best match on the show of the few that we had. The other thing that I really liked about it is that got close to what we talked about in the trailer for this season, the art of the great TV match. This was maybe even a little more rushed than you'd like, but it was still that Jay Lethal, Jeff Jarrett main event was pretty close to a perfect TV match. Worst thing on the show. I will say, I don't know. To me, it's a cross between Eric Young lurking and the whole thing with Jeremy Borash, because I could not stand Eric Young at that time period. I couldn't deal with it. I would say it would either be that or probably Slick Johnson ruining that Larry Zbyszko, Jeremy Borash moment backstage.
That is 100% the correct answer. That guy ruining that great segment. The other thing that was terrible on the show is no Monty Brown.
Yes,
We're big fans of Monty Brown here. I learned in the last episode of TNA that we watched that Monty Brown was one of my favorite wrestlers that I never knew was one of my favorite wrestlers, and he was not on this show. He was in highlight video packages, so I know he was with the company, but not a single mention of him on this show, which is unbelievable.
Yes, we should. If we were gimmicking the randomizer, we would put some sort of stipulation that could only pick TNA shows that had Monty Brown on it. Hopefully at some point in this season or in future seasons, we get more Monty Brown, because yes, he is one of the absolute bright spots of TNA Impact Wrestling.
Also, no Jim Cornette. We heard a lot about him. I would have liked to have seen him on this show. He wasn't here, apparently. And that gasoline angle is dumb if you're not going to follow up on it as a big deal. You tried to make it a big deal. You tried to tell me that Jeff Jarrett's the most hated man in wrestling because he did the most heinous thing ever by putting gasoline in a man's eye, and then that man is totally fine. So it's not a big deal.
If you can't like hold up the end of the bargain of like what happens after the incredibly violent angle, then you shouldn't do it in the first place. And I guess that speaks to, I wonder where they went in the weeks after the beatdown, the bloody violent beatdown of Chris Daniels and AJ Styles. If they were just back, I
don't want to know if they ruined it. Yeah.
I'm hoping Daniels had a bandage on his head at least. Maybe he came back angry wearing the same bloody shirt. I would have liked to see that.
Every single Thursday, we post to social media what this week's episode will cover, so make sure you're following us and on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is by far the best way to interact with the show. We love to hear. DMs are open, so send us a message, send us a comment. We love to interact with everybody. That's at WrestleAtRandom on Twitter, Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom, and of course, WrestlingAtRandom.com is the website that has all of the links to subscribe to this show. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you tell your friends about this show. Show them how to subscribe to a podcast if they don't know. Tell them to tell your friends. Tell your friends that used to be wrestling fans about us, because I think they'll enjoy taking a trip down memory lane with us as well.
Absolutely. And make sure to tell your former friends who are still wrestling fans, tell them about the podcast. It won't bring you back together, but it will bring them to this show. And that's what we're most concerned about.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up this week. Thanks for joining us, Adam.
Definitely. Thank you, Jeremy. This is, God, I guess of the 3 TNA shows we've reviewed so far on this season of the podcast, 2 of them have been good. Wasn't expecting that.
Oh, we are tempting fate here with the randomizer.
Absolutely.
I don't know what Greg the Hammer Valentine punishment I'm in store for later this season, but woo. With that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.